And we're going to start. I was fascinated about this time because Willimon works with the Good Samaritan as what we are doing together here today. And so I want to read you the Good Samaritan passage because he'll listen to it. He'll kind of take it in a different direction. Oh, yeah, that's right. I got to do that. Okay, this is the Good Samaritan. Now, I want you to listen and just see what you hear in this story. And then we're going to talk about that. A legal expert stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to gain eternal life?" Jesus replied, "What is written in the law? How do you interpret it?" He responded, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." Jesus said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live." But the legal expert, this is a great translation, the legal expert wanted to prove that he was right. I love that. So he said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" And Jesus replied, well, as Jesus often does, it reminds me of a story. Somebody said, that we're storytellers, and he said, if you ever type into a supercomputer, will a computer ever be as smart as a human? And the computer comes back, that reminds me of a story. He said, we're in trouble. Okay, anyway, who is my neighbor? Jesus replied, "A man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho. He encountered thieves who stripped him naked, beat him up, and left him near death. So it just so happened that a priest was also going down the same road. When he saw the injured man, he crossed over to the other side of the road and went on his way. Likewise, a Levite came by the spot, saw the injured man, crossed over to the other side of the road and went on his way. A Samaritan who was on a journey came to where the man was, but when he saw him, he was moved with compassion. The Samaritan went to him and bandaged his wounds, tending them with oil and wine. Then he placed the wounded man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took 2 full days' worth of wages and gave them to the innkeeper. And he said, 'Take care of him, and when I return, I will pay you back for any additional cost.' What do you think? Which one of these 3 was a neighbor to the man who encountered thieves?" Then the legal expert said, "The one who demonstrated mercy toward him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." Now, what do you hear in that story? Compassion. Yeah. From who for who?
From a Samaritan for a Jew, which is the big getting over the other part.
Yeah. Remember, Jews would go out of their way to avoid Samaritans. Literally.
Why do you think Jesus chose a Samaritan as the person to give compassion?
Because and I've read several books on parables, Jesus often picks the unpickable. And also, okay, let's just retell the parable. A guy's laying by the side of the road, and a priest walks by, and the priest says, I really ought to do something, goes over and helps him. Well, anybody who hears that story goes, well, of course he did. That's his job. And there's no catch to the story. But then the 2 go by, and the Samaritan, who, and we're going to talk more about that, the Samaritan helps. And everybody in the crowd is probably angry at this point because they hate Samaritans, and to have them be the hero just drives them crazy. And so but the Samaritan, who had no real relational responsibility to do one stupid thing for this guy, is the one who helps. Okay, but hang on. The fun continues. This thing keeps... Okay. "But who is my neighbor?" the lawyer persists, implying that love is... This is on Willimon, page 85. Implying that love is easy, but neighbor is not. If I can figure out who is my neighbor, carefully differentiating between those who are worthy of my neighborliness and those who are not, I will love my neighbor. By the way, what is the latest trend in neighbors? Who am I supposed to like?
People like me.
Yeah.
Who look like me. Think
Yep.
like me.
Think like me, yada, yada, yada. Okay. It's not that the priest and the Levite were bad. They are identified as full-time religionists. An important function of religion, unfortunately, is to enable us to make distinctions between the innocent and the guilty, the victim and the oppressor, the deserving and the undeserving poor. You can't help everybody in need. You don't know how the man in the ditch contributed to his own plight. I mean, after all, he's not your problem. You've got your hands full looking after family and friends, and there have to be limits. I was talking to someone near and dear to me about the border crisis, and they said, well, you know, you just can't help everybody. Okay. And your criteria is what? Yeah.
But I have a pretty good picture in my mind of what not helping is too.
Yeah. All right. And that's how we rationalize. Not doing anything. It's really their fault. It's not ours. I mean, they're undeserving. And so since they're undeserving, I don't have to do anything. A member of this congregation one time told me that he had helped somebody and somebody said, well, you don't know what he'll do with the money. He said, I don't really care what he does with the money. My generosity is not about him, it's about me. And if you want to rationalize, you can always figure out a way to do it. I'm good at it. I'm one of the world's great rationalizers. Yes, sir.
One of what I consider rationalization that I've often heard talking with folks from the far right, the religious right,
Yeah.
is that, well, by giving them this stuff, you're not really helping them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah, in a way, you know, and I understand. I can understand that. In a way, for some reason, that reminds me of a story, as it often does. This poor family moves into town, and the local Methodist church decides to help them. And so they find them a place to stay, and they wait for them to show up at church the next Sunday, and they don't come. And so they help them some more. They get them a job, and get some clothes, and get food to the house, find them a place to live, yada, yada. Next Sunday comes, they don't go. And they try again, and still nothing. And so finally somebody just says, you know, we've given you a lot of help. Why haven't you come to church? Said, yeah, you've given us a great deal of help. In fact, we're so well off, we've become Episcopalians. So, again, I didn't know. But that doesn't do anything for anybody. But for some reason, it just came to mind.
it's helped them, but not
Yeah, not us, yeah.
Okay, so
But sometimes
what was the motivation for helping them again? Where was the heart?
Yes, exactly. I said what the issue might be is, why are we doing it in the first place? I've been fascinated to watch people want to put names on their generosity. I'll give you the money for this building, but I want my name on it. Well, okay, but why? When you're dead, you're going to be just as dead, and will be walking around and I wonder who that guy was. You know, anyway. Okay. Now here's the basic question for Willimon, I think. What does it mean to have your life saved? Jesus saved. Great. What does that mean? Well, I would contend that what it means is, remember what the definition of conversion is, or repentance is it comes from the Greek metanoia. You know, you've been in church long enough to have heard that sermon 400,000 times, which means to literally turn around, to see from a different perspective, to see things differently. Okay, now, that's what I think it means to have your life saved from what you are to what you could be, right? But the problem is, if we always stay within the realms of our particular silo, we never see anything else, and so we never become anything else. Or as Zan Holmes used to say, some people when they come to church, they come as they are and they go as they came. Okay? Now, the odd thing is that Jesus reverses the lawyer's question. Not how can I be a neighbor to strangers, but which stranger is a neighbor to me? Now, see, I've missed that one. I'm grateful to have taught this because I've done the Good Samaritan a number of times, but that one never dawned on me, really. And what does it mean for them to be the neighbor to me? And I would contend, and I think Willimon would contend, that when the person is really the neighbor is saving me. See where I'm going with that? Why? Because I am introduced to a larger perspective. Okay? Now, we, like the lawyer, want to know the limits of our responsibility toward others. How can we distinguish worthy recipients of our love? Who are the deserving poor? How much are we supposed to give? Who is my neighbor? But the story is not about to whom are we to be neighbors. It is about who is a neighbor to us. Now, Farrah and I took my son and his wife, or we met out there, and we got the grand tour again of Community First Village. As my son and I were walking around, I turned to him and I said, all this tells you is whatever dreams you have, they're too small. Because this guy has created this incredible facility and is literally saving people's lives. But he will tell you that his interactions with them are saving him. You know, if you want to know what a saint looks like, just go say hello to Alan Graham. I know he looks like Santa Claus, but it's all right. It's all right. Now the issue is, will I allow this particular neighbor to save me? Or, collectively, will we allow them to save us? Now you see where this is going? To the extent that you and I cut off people because, quote, they are undeserving or dirty, filthy, wicked, mean, and nasty, or, run around with, drink, smoke, chew, run around with girls that do, all that stuff that we grew up with. To the extent that we cut those people off, then what? We are cutting off their possibility to expand our worldview and to save us. Okay. Now, here's the ongoing theme for Willimon through this thing. I think I would rather die than be saved by the likes of you. In other words, I would rather stay where I am than have to allow you to save me. Now that's another one I had missed. And I had milked that story for a lot of sermons, but I had never got to that. Ever got to that.
You don't think so?
Huh?
You don't think you have?
Well, I don't think I have. And I was listening. Yeah, some of you have napped off, but that was okay. Okay, Willimon again. Remember this argument with the lawyer. Now this is you need always, by the way, here's the deal. Whenever you read a parable, look what set it up. Because the parable only makes sense. It just becomes a nice story if you don't know why he told it in the first place. He never was just killing time, as near as I can tell. There is a method to the madness. And so here's the setup. Remember, this argument with the lawyer is preceded by the charge of this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. This is answering your question, by the way, why I always pick Samaritans. And this thing keeps coming up and bugging me. Okay. This one welcomes prodigal sons, forgives adulterous women, and welcomes thieves into paradise. This one claims that God's sun shines on the good and the bad. Father, forgive them, he says, even as we tortured him to death. This one then returns in resurrection to the very one, us, who betrayed and forsook him. This one's love relentlessly risk reaching out, reaching down, thus making our charity look miserly. The result was that the response of many people was, we would rather be saved by anybody but you. The problem is not only that we don't know who our neighbors are, we don't know who is our God. He came to the wounded, the naked, the lonely, the dying. We looked upon him and said in unison, we'd rather fearfully hunker down with folks like us than risk welcome of those whom you embrace. We would rather die than be saved by the likes of you. And so what do? If Jesus makes us uncomfortable, we'll create a Jesus that we like. One we choose to be saved by. But because we have chosen the criteria by which we choose the one who saves us, we will never probably finally be saved because we will never choose someone that really challenges who we are. Does that make my English teacher in the 6th grade trying to diagram that sentence would have hurt herself, probably. We had our 55th class reunion yesterday, by the way. And my best friend in high school's mother was my 6th grade teacher who taught. I remember every day. I know they don't do that anymore. Name the parts of speech and then diagram the sentence. Okay, yeah, okay. But we really tend to create a Jesus we like. My contention, I try not to step on anybody too hard, but the prosperity gospel is a classic distortion of what that's about. Jesus does want us to be well and healthy, etc., etc. I'm not sure he wants me necessarily to be filthy rich. Yes?
That book you referred to us to last week, that Reconstruction.
Yeah.
Part of that theme is he indicated that it seems to me that we've grown up in a culture where we've created that.
Sure.
Because that Jesus that we like.
Yeah, sure.
Part of our
his distinguishment is slaveholder Jesus and the real Jesus. I was having a conversation. There were only 3 liberals in the whole class, I think, and we all gathered in the corner to protect ourselves. We were talking about exactly that and how we. I grew up in a culture that was 80% Hispanic. And yet I was only vaguely aware of the vast difference with the way people were treated. Because I was a teenager and I was much more aware of my own pain and suffering because getting up every morning was another, trip into terror. But it was just more comfortable that way. I'm not going to tell you the name of this book because the title itself is filthy. I mean, it really is. But it's by a guy named Manson. And it's one of those. It's not Charles. No. It's no. It may be a cousin. It may be a cousin, but I don't know. Anyway, I have found that you don't always get good in it simply because a guy is not your kind of couth does not mean they don't know something to tell you. Okay? And I love it when people immediately go, well, he uses profanity. Well, yeah, but sometimes he's telling you the truth too. Classic case. George Carlin. You know. Or a bunch of others. A bunch of you know I'm a great fan of comedians because I think comedians are the prophets of any age because they hold up the world and go, let's look at this. No, wait a minute. Let's turn it just a little bit so you can see it differently. And you go, wait a minute. That don't make any sense at all. Well, yeah, but you never thought of it, did you? I haven't looked at it that way. No. And I don't want to look at it that way. So I won't. But anyway, Manson's law of avoidance. The more something threatens your identity, the more you will avoid it. Survival bias or so. From the book, Reconstructing the Gospel. The true and living God does not deal in abstractions, but meets people personally, offering a way forward, not as a step-by-step itinerary, but as a journey in the company of unlikely friends. Unlikely friends. A small thing from yesterday. I was talking earlier about it to some people. Everybody in my class is approaching rapidly 75 years of age. And the interesting thing, there were about 40 of us there yesterday. And the interesting thing was that there was a higher level of honesty between the people than I have ever experienced in one of those things before. At the 25th reunion, you're always trying to impress everybody with how well you're doing and yada, yada, yada. You know, yesterday it was talking about children lost, spouses lost, worry about where the country was going. Just like it was a fascinating thing of people's journeys to get where they are. And we always want to assume that every day in every way we're getting better and better. Well, after about